All right, everybody, welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over something that I've been getting questions on lately. So, what is trend? How do we recognize trend? How do we define trend? Could we say that today was trend? This is a NASDAQ chart on the 5-minute time frame. Is this trend? Now I'm asking it the way that it's been asked of me, but by the time I'm done with this video, hopefully you'll be asking it from a different perspective. So first, what is trend? Let's just start with what the market distinguishes as trend. A trend is the overall direction of a market or an asset's price. In technical analysis, trends are identified by trend lines or by price action that is highlighted when price is making higher swing highs and higher swing lows for an uptrend, or lower swing lows and lower swing highs for a downtrend. And just pause there, right? And kind of digest that, chew on it for a moment. Higher highs with higher lows, lower highs with lower lows in a swing. Why add that context in a swing, right? How does that become a part of the whole thing? Well, if you think about a market, it does not just go straight up, right? A market has a sine wave, and when it is going up, it still has highs and lows. Now, I drew that at a very steep angle. Generally speaking, trends form somewhere between a 30 and a 45-degree angle, not a 90-degree angle or a 75-degree angle, right? And obviously I suck at drawing, but if we use that perfect 45-degree angle, we still would see price in a sine wave. So we're going to see higher highs and higher lows, or conversely, going in the other direction, we're going to see lower highs and lower lows, but it would still be a trend in some way. And it can be as ugly or as clean as we would ever want it to be, but swing lows and swing highs, trend lines, being able to snap a trend line on the price action, all of those would help you be able to define, is this a trend? And remember, you don't want to try to mix up different time frames. If you're looking at a 5-minute and you ask, is this a trend? You're implying, is this a trend on this 5-minute chart? Because once we start adding other time frames in, then the time frame that you're on is irrelevant, right? A trend is the general direction of the price of a market asset or a metric. It's the general direction of price. So let's come back over to today's price action. Is this a trend? We had a general price direction. We even had a 45-degree angle if we were looking at it from that being a 90-degree angle. And this splitting the difference between that 90, right? If this is our arc, there's our 45-degree angle. Could we stipulate or state that we had a clear direction? Not too much, right? Not very easily, but look at that moving average. Is that moving average making crazy waves all over the place? Or is that moving average pointed in one direction in a consistent, persistent direction? It is moving in one direction consistently and persistently. So the average price of this market moved to the downside throughout the trading day. Did it trend? Now, there are some articles that you could read that say 3 candles form the basis of a trend. So if I zoom in here, I can say there was trend here. There was trend here. There was trend there. Did this market trend today? We could say that. Was there trending price action in today's range? We could say that. But what I really think people are asking is a completely different question. They're not honestly asking, is this a trend day? Right? But let's go back again. What is the definition of trend? And all of the ways that we could search it out and find answers to that, Investopedia says swing highs and swing lows. I've seen other places that say higher highs and higher lows, lower highs and lower lows, right? A consistent, persistent direction in price. But are we honestly trying to distinguish a name for what it is that we're looking at? Or are we really just trying to find a trade? And from that, should we be using trend trade strategies or range trade strategies? Should we fade the play or go with the flow? If we come back to this, we did have higher highs and or lower highs and lower lows throughout the day. We did have a consistent, persistent price direction throughout the day. We stayed underneath the 50. We had consecutively lower highs through the whole range, through the whole range of the day until we got into the afternoon session and rallied into the close. That forms the definition of trend, but would you use a trend trade strategy in this? I would say no, we would not. And the reason for that is clear when you start to think about, well, where would we use a trend trade strategy? I would use a trend trade strategy in a market that looked like this. That is a tradable trend to me. And don't get me wrong when I say that. This is tradable. I did trade this. I was in this today. But this was not done with trend trading tactics. I didn't use trend trading tactics. I used range tactics. In price action that looks like this, I use continuation plays. I get in and I move with the market in the direction that is expected to continue with no end in sight until we reach our next target, right? In a market like this, it was getting in at the lows and getting out at the highs, or having it reverse on us before it reached those highs. Getting in across the highs and going to the lows, or getting out since it failed to reach those lows. That's it. That's range trading to me. Was there trend that we could trade? I mean, we had lower highs and lower lows. That's the very definition of trend. But would I trade it as a trend trade strategy? Well, for a trend trade strategy, I would actually need it to pull back and then let me in. Unless you're catching wick pullbacks, it didn't do that. So we want to get past the label of trend, even just the question of trend, and instead get to the heart of what you're trying to ask. What kind of trading tactics should I use on a day that looks like this? Trend trading tactics. You should look for 786 pullbacks or breakouts above the previous pivot. And then you should look for measured moves so that each impulse and each leg is quantified with a new target and a new area for the next pullback, right? That forms a trend trading tactic, trend trading strategies. trend trading logic that can be applied in a trending market. Is this trend? Yeah, I suppose. It has the qualifications and the classifications of trend. I would not use trend trading tactics here. So to help with that question, is this a trend? I hear that every day. I get that question. Is this a trend? Is this a trend? How about the, is this a trend? Is this a trend? 3 candles can become trend. Just only 3 candles, and you could say there is trend. So you should never have to ask that question again after today's video. If we were to go, what is a trend, a market trend, and look at pictures, there's all kinds of really great examples of a market in a trend. We can just kind of scroll down and find different definitions and different criteria and different logic. But at the end of it all, what we're really trying to ask is, what kind of trading tactics should I be trying to apply? Should I be fading the range, or should I be joining the move? The way that I teach my coaching clients is we first start out with the cleanest, clearest, most sexy price action that you could ever find, the picture perfect definition of trend, and we say, this is a trend. And along the way, you learn to pick up that even ugly days like the trading day that we had today could very easily be considered a trend, but it wouldn't be a trend that we would want to trade with trend trade strategies. So whenever you see a day that looks like this, and you look back on it at the end of the day, and you want to classify this or qualify it as something, is this a trend day? Is this even trend? Very clear run up and then a pullback. A very clear run up and then a pullback. Very clear run up and then a pullback. And then a topping pattern when we failed to make new highs. Very beautiful, very clean price action. That is the most perfect example of a trend. Even in this here, it didn't go as far. It didn't last as long. We had a market that trended until it gave us a topping pattern, and it couldn't give us new highs. There was trend. Here as well, an impulse move and a pullback, but then trend until it couldn't give us new highs. We paused for lunch. The argument could be made that we resumed the trend for just a little bit more, had a pullback and then another higher high. The argument could be made for that. I don't really like that argument. I wouldn't even try to distinguish this later part of the day. There was a consistent move to the downside and a reciprocation back up. There was a grind to the upside to get to that level before that pullback. Was it trending? I mean, just like before, we have higher highs and higher lows, but it was very muted. It'd be just a grind, right? It's tradable, but I don't think that I would be using trend trading tactics to trade that. Here again, impulse, pullback, trend, flag, new breakout, failure to reclaim a new high, and it was done. Was it trend? Yeah. Was it trending? Candle after candle after candle, consecutively higher highs and higher lows? Absolutely. Was that trend? Yeah. Choppy, nasty trend. And here, trend. And see what I mean? Like, asking if it's trend doesn't get you to what you're looking for. We can call it whatever we want. We call it Bob's uncle. What kind of trade strategies should I use in a market that looks like this? Range trade or impulse trades. Look at the size of these candles. These are just monster impulses. It almost doesn't even fit the qualification of a trend because it was just a dump, move, rebound, right? And then, you know, there's some consistent consecutive candles. But what is this? Big candle, reciprocation, big candle. You know, you see what I'm saying here? Is that trend? No, it's more like impulse and reactions and violence. But on this time frame, did we have that angle, that consistent move in a particular direction with lower highs all the way through the day? Yes, we did. Gosh, is that trend? Yep. How would we trade this? Well, while I do say it is tradable, I would argue that we wouldn't want to, right? If you're so inexperienced that you're finding value in the things that I'm discussing in this video, you would want to stand aside and not trade this, right? Because I'm talking about like the basics of price action and the basics of market logic and like welcome to trading 101, introduction to what's a candle and what's a wick and how do I enter a trade. This is the foundations and the beginning of price and understanding the market logic. So if you're finding the dawn of revelation here and are surprised by the things that I'm saying in this video, you wouldn't want to trade this. The size of these candles alone would be stopping you out so fast. You would have no skill at reading flow, no skill at joining with the move of the market, let alone getting the market direction correct. This market turned around before hitting pivots, big, very massive sweeps and impulse plays. Is it tradable? Yes, it absolutely is tradable. Is it worth the risk to attempting to trade this for new traders? Nope. You should recognize the conditions as dangerous and violent and requiring a larger amount of capital for a stop than you should be willing to give. And that you should stand aside and find a different market to trade or a different day to trade. And you could know in advance that it was going to be like that just by recognizing that we were going to open the day inside of the Globex range. It's a very good place to start. Are we inside of yesterday's range? Yes. Are we inside of yesterday's Globex? Yes. Then it is very likely going to be a choppy, violent day. It doesn't always happen, right? We've had really nice trade days inside of a Globex range or inside of yesterday's range. So it's no guarantee that if we're inside yesterday's range, we will see chop like this. There's no guarantee of it, but it's very likely. So it would have been no surprise that today was chop. And I even mentioned it in the morning briefing that we were very far away from the 10-period moving average and that it was likely to be a sideways day and or a little bit of a pullback while we waited for those MAs to catch up. So is this trend? I think we've defined the very qualifications and classifications of what could be and what is a trend. But I think the better question is, what kind of trade logic should I use here? Should I use range bound trade logic, fading the highs, buying the lows? Or should I try to join price as it continues its move in a particular direction? Well, if it's a consistent, persistent price move without large, violent drops and random price changes, then you should probably use a trend trade strategy. But if the market is consistently changing direction and giving you violent impulse plays in various directions with no rhyme or reason, you're probably going to want to stand aside no matter what you call it. I appreciate your time, guys. I look forward to seeing you at the next video.